Can you see it now?
Yes,
Yes, I see it.
I see it too. Yay. Okay, it's all yours.
Okay, great. I'm just going to tell you right now that I can't see the your stuff. So if anybody has, so you're going to have to tell me if people have questions. So first of all, I'm just going to get started, and thank you very much for organizing this. And I'm delighted to be here. And I know it's your evening, what I'm gonna do is make this conversational. I'm gonna ask some questions, and you can ask questions at any time. I'm gonna leave time at the end for more questions. And what I really want to do is kind of give you a high-level overview of add on to what Nozomi said is like why I do what I do, and what I saw happening in the world of I'm going to specifically look at Asian women because that's been my research for the past probably a decade now, and so I might refer apologies if there's any men on the phone, but I might refer a lot to women because I found this work that I'm focusing on. Actually, it was based on all the research I did with women and the work I did with women. So just to let you know, Nozomi and Grace, because I can't see the I don't know, the little webinar thing. If there's any questions, just kind of shout out to me and let me know. Is
Okay.
that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll
All
do
right.
that.
So so I call this the art of career navigation, and the reason why I call it that, and I love the poll because I'm going to touch on the mentor piece. So it was really great to have that poll. And I'm going to touch on definitely not taking time to think about what you want to do. So, so just give you a little bit of context. So I left the United States a long time ago. I lived in Southern California, and I went to China. And the first job I had was actually in Changsha, Hunan Province. Studied Chinese and then taught English. And then when I moved to Hong Kong and moved to Singapore, what I saw was a lot of challenges with careers. Even though working for great organizations and organizations really wanted to provide career paths, um, there were times when people were passed over for promotions and they didn't feel like, oh, you know, where's my career going? And every time you read engagement surveys, it's always around, oh, I don't see a career path here. And so I think this is a huge opportunity for organizations to start looking at careers, and I think it's a huge opportunity for individuals to start kind of thinking about what they want to do. Because I always get people mid-career who say, I really don't like what I'm doing, and you know, I started out wanting to be an accountant or being an engineer, and this is not what I really want to do. So I give a lot of talks, and I was going to go on stage at one presentation that I gave, and it was in Australia, and I was going to stand, and it was I think there were 400 women in the audience. So I was going to stand on stage and say, you know what, we just have to start talking about what we want to do, and we have to tell people what we want to do. And I was kind of all pumped up to do this. And the evening before, there was a round table with CEOs, and this one CEO said, she was the head of a big fashion brand, and somebody in the audience said, so how did you get to do what you're doing now? And she said, oh, I just fell into it. You know, you don't really need to plan your career. You just kind of fall into it. So that's my first, sorry, I'll put my first question, are careers serendipitous, are they planned? So this was a really powerful CEO, and she told the audience that you don't have to do any planning, you don't have to talk about what you want to do, it just kind of happens. And I was thinking, I can't go on stage and tell people they have to plan and think about what they want to do after the CEO said this, right? And then as I was doing research in my research with women, what I found, there was a woman I met who was running a hedge fund. And I said, running a hedge fund, that's a really tough thing to do. How did you get into that? And she said, oh, I don't really know. I just fell into it. So I started finding a lot of people saying they just fell into it. And I thought, I don't think you can just fall into being a CEO of a hedge fund or fall into being a CEO of a big fashion iconic brand. I think there's a lot more to it than that. And it actually hits on the point that you said with the 52% said no mentors. Every single woman that I interviewed, and this is just not with women, I've interviewed men in leadership positions too, have had a mentor or a sponsor to kind of bring them along or push them along or pull them. And and while that relationship didn't necessarily have to be a formal relationship, for some people it was, inside the organization. For others, it was just an informal relationship. So the women with the fashion brand, actually, I kind of did a little bit of research because I was really surprised, like, how do you get to be a CEO of a fashion brand? It was her family who had been in the fashion business for years, and her mother kind of made some very definite introductions for her that helped her along the way with her career. So I kind of sit on two fences with this. I really think that we have to be planned with we have to think about what we want to do, because what's going to happen sort of mid-career is what I find with a lot of people is that they'll say, well, I'm not so certain what I want to do, and what I'm doing now just doesn't fit with my doesn't fit anymore. So here's what I also found too, which is really powerful in the sense from a diversity inclusion perspective. And if you're going to the summit, for the Asian Summit and the ERG, I know it's very much part of diversity inclusion, and going there about for career days, is a lot of organizations are really focused on career of diversity inclusion, really want to move women ahead. And I'm actually going to put another component on that. They really want to move Asian women ahead. And for those of you who know of Hannah Rosen, she wrote a book last year called The End of Men. Not a very nice title, and I don't think it's true, but it was a very provocative title. And there's the penultimate chapter in her book said that Asian women will rule the world. So I'd recommend all of you go out and buy that book and read it. And what she's talking about is actually the demographic shift in Asia. So organizations have a huge push for women and a huge push for Asian women, particularly where I sit in Asia Pacific, to move them into leadership roles. And I do a lot of work coaching women. So what happens when I go in to coach women that I'm hired in organizations to go and help with leadership transition to the next level of leadership, right? So here's what I often hear. I'm so glad you're here, but I don't want to be here anymore. And I'm kind of taken back because I'm not there to get them to leave, and their organizations want me to get them to stay, right? And so I'll ask that question, which probably all of you have heard your whole entire life. So what is it that you really want to do? And if you think about that, it's a really hard question to answer, or it's a really hard question for most people. So when I asked women, when I go into organizations, so what is it that you really want to do? If you don't want to be here, what is it that you want to do? And most will say, I don't know, which you're probably all thinking in your head right now too, right? Or maybe some of you know what you want to do. So, so what I have found is there's a huge disconnect and a huge opportunity with diversity inclusion initiatives that are very much linked to this opportunity or challenge to start talking to individuals about what they want to do with their careers. So it's a huge opportunity for organizations, but it's also an even bigger opportunity for you to kind of sit down and think about, well, what is it that I really want to do? And I'm not necessarily talking about like, oh, I want to be the vice president of marketing, or I want to be the senior vice president, or I want to be the CEO. I actually work in an area of looking at kind of your values and going back and looking at your life and looking at meaningful careers and life's purpose. So if you think about, there's a fascinating poll by Gallup that says, Gallup does this research every year, has been doing it for 10 years, saying that, think about, $1 trillion is spent on career transitions and changing and the disengagement of people at work. And if you think about why people leave organizations, the first response is usually money, right? Most people will say, oh, I wanted to leave because I wasn't making enough money. But if you think about leaving your job, you're naturally going to start leaving your job because you're offered more money, or when you think about leaving a job, you're going to be thinking about, well, I'm going to make more money. So money is an easy one, and I don't think it's the real reason why people leave. So if you wait a little bit and do some exit surveys, you find out that, well, maybe money was it, but the other thing people might say, well, you know what, I had a really difficult boss and I didn't really get along with my boss, or so I left because of my boss. And that's another one that CLC and Gallup and everybody says, you have to do lots of development with the managers because that's why people leave organizations. But fascinating enough, actually, speaking about LinkedIn, LinkedIn did some research with Cornerstone a couple years ago and found that 51% women leave organizations because they don't see a career path. And I thought this was really telling, that it kind of got to what I was feeling and seeing inside organizations, and it links definitely to a lot what I saw inside organizations, where some women were being passed over for roles. There's lots of data saying women fall off the talent path, and instead of asking why, organizations think, oh, we just don't provide enough development, or we provide different answers. But there's a direct link. If you're passed over for promotion time and time again, then you don't see a career path. And it's naturally when a search firm calls or somebody says, here's a new job, that you're going to leave. So I believe it's really focused on finding out what people want to do, and then also for all of us to find out um, what we want to do. So how do you do that? So here's the first part of, I created a career manifesto, and it's at the end, and I know you can, I'm going to give you a link to my site where you can download this. I have it written in English and in Chinese and in Spanish. I had Japanese, but it wasn't, I don't think it was the right translation. But so this is literally the first line from my career manifesto. It says, look within, take stock of who you are and what matters most. You have everything that's needed to succeed. So what I do is, typically when I ask that question, so what is it that you really want to do? The next question I ask is, well, how much time have you thought about, your career and what you want to do? And it gets back to the percentage that you just said. Actually, I have a higher percentage with most of the women that I work with, that typically none of them think about their careers, or they don't take the time to think about their careers. They haven't had time. And a lot of times I work with, and my research has been with moms who have either mothers or parent responsibilities or other family responsibilities, taking care of aging parents that literally don't have the time. They've got their job, they've got their community, they either have family or children they're taking care of. So how do you take time for yourself? And I think this is critically important, to take a step back and think about what it is you want to do. And while this slide, you think it looks simple, it's not the easiest thing to do, is to take stock of who you are and what you want to be. You can do it like in the morning, take a couple minutes in the morning to reflect. If any of you meditate, you can start writing a journal. There's all sorts of books out there of things you can do. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I use in what I recommend. You can do it now. You can do it after this call, because it's the evening for you, and think about it. So I talk about looking at your values. So I'm going to start with the first one on values, and this is about thinking about what matters to you. You can talk about integrity or honesty or authenticity. I'm going to value. There's list of values. And I typically recommend picking about, 5 values that are really important to you. And think about the ones that guide you. Like what is it that kind of gets you through your day? What is it that you think about when you're thinking about a job or think about your organization? Or what's one value that you won't compromise? And if you think about this, it doesn't take long to do this. You can, like, if you, are sitting at home and just reflecting on it, what are the values that are most important to me, and start writing those down. And the next step is where you're working or what you're doing. How does your organization or how does your role support those values? What is it that's that how is that played out at work? So if I think about myself a little bit, one of the values, which is actually very much related to my business, is helping others. And I've always been in organizational development and leadership development and talent, and that's kind of and coaching is very much a career role. I've never been driven by um, uh, um, never been driven by money, so to speak. So if I'm all about giving back and money is not a huge driver for me, probably working at a bank is not gonna it's not gonna fit with what I want to do. Not saying there's anything wrong with working at a bank, but it's just different values. So I had to really take a look at what I wanted to do, and it makes sense that my values were very much aligned with kind of what was going on with the Walt Disney Company. And I think if all of you just sit back and go, what are my values? Look at where you're working now, you're going to see they're probably very much aligned. And the best one is to figure out what you're not going to compromise. So that's the first step I recommend, is taking time, and that doesn't take a whole lot of time to do. There's no reason why you can't sit and think about your values. The next one is called pivotal events. And this one is a little bit longer, and I would highly recommend that all of you do this. You can do it now. You can do it at the end of the call, and really reflect on it. And there'll be some career coaches that will say, "Oh, really? You don't need to look at your past events in your life. Just move forward." And there's tons of quotes on that. And I absolutely disagree with that. I have researching women. What I found out more about a lot about leadership and a lot more about careers. And every single woman I interviewed had multiple pivotal events that shaped who they were, changed the direction of their career. So when I talk about a pivotal event, it could be something that happened that put you on a different path. Maybe you moved, maybe you moved to a different state or a different country. It could be something that caused a setback. Maybe you tried something new and it didn't work, and it was a mistake or a failure, and you thought, how am I going to bounce back from that? And the point is, it's the learning and all of this. So all of us have had multiple pivotal events. Could be finding your life partner, could be having children, could be anything. It could be getting a great promotion. So it's both positive and negative. So I want to share a story with you with a Japanese woman that I interviewed for my research to kind of bring this pivotal event alive. So I did research all across the Asia Pacific region. I interviewed women from Bangladesh all the way up to Japan, and asking them about their leadership lessons and what how do they experience leadership. And as I was looking at their life, what I found, actually this is one of my biggest mistakes. I asked about failure, and none of them articulated any failures, and it was the crux of my research. And so I started looking at all the research I did on their lives, and I found multiple pivotal events. Not to say that these were failures, but they were different setbacks that they had. So one woman in particular had left Japan because she felt that she needed to go explore outside of her country to be the person she wanted to be. And she was an architect by trade, but decided to go into organic food and become a chef. And she loved to cook, and she opened up a string of restaurants across Australia, New Zealand, organic, really healthy foods, and absolutely loved what she was doing. And her whole life was about giving and helping others. And actually, one of the reasons why she got into being a chef is she wanted to try to eradicate poverty. So in the middle of her successful restaurants, she developed a disease on her hands and she had to stop cooking. So this was really one of many pivotal events for her. And she went to every doctor across Asia and said, what's with my hands and what can I do? And they said, nothing. You have to stop cooking. Can't go near food. She was really distraught, and she was driving along an open road in Australia, and parked her car and looked at her hands and said, really, what are you trying to tell me? And it was at that moment, by looking at her diseased hands, that she decided that what she was doing was not what she was supposed to be doing. She decided to start an NGO to really eradicate poverty. And she launched and started this global NGO, and that's exactly what she does today. So when I looked back on her life and looked at what she was doing, every single event in her life led up to that final event of starting this NGO. And this is why I believe so strongly in looking back on, why did you decide to go to the university you went to? Why did you pick those classes? Even if it was, recommended by parents or family or teachers. What did you do when you changed jobs? But the most important thing on all of this is, what did you learn from that experience? What did she learn from it wasn't even her, what did she learn from these diseased hands? It was this message, if you will, telling her, here's what you should be doing and here's where you're going. So fascinating enough, and I'm certain all of you have heard the kind of Steve Jobs stories and listened to Steve Jobs when he's the late Steve Jobs, and he's given talks. And in that one talk at Stanford, he talks about looking back on his life, and he talks about his kind of interest in fonts and how that led to his experience of what he created. So each one of you had these pivotal events, multiple events, and so these events are real insights into who you are and what you want to become. So I talk about, when I talk about look within, I talk about looking within for your career, your values, and then I also talk about finding out what matters most to you. And usually when we've had some setbacks, or usually we've had some huge celebrations, those combination of those two let you know what are kind of where you're headed. So if I can give you one thing, what I want you to do is take time during this week and go, so what was a pivotal event for me, and what did I learn from that? And it's not just to stop there. A lot of times when I've done workshops, we go through 3 or 4 of these, and you'll start seeing patterns of behaviors, and you'll start seeing responses to challenges and opportunities, and you'll literally start seeing a path of where you're headed. So let me take you to my next one, which is your story. So there is a lot of talk out there in the marketplace about women need to stand up and talk about what they want to do, and certainly, Sheryl Sandberg put this brought the diversity or feminist, new feminism on the table to talk about the Lean In movement. And there's tons of Lean In circles. And I think this is a great idea for to be able to talk about what we want to do. But what I found in my research is majority of women I work with for the past decade, and almost all the women in my research felt uncomfortable with, not necessarily leaning in, but felt uncomfortable with the words self-promotion. And in my first book, I wish I'd known that earlier in my career, I talk about self-promotion, how you can do it, and some ethical ways of doing it. And there are ways that you can do it that doesn't feel like self-promotion. But I also realized that even after writing that book, there's people who just don't necessarily feel comfortable doing it. So in doing my research, what I was fortunate to be able to use storytelling as a research method, and there is lots of powers in stories, and every single one of you has a story to share. And instead of thinking about self-promotion, why not think about telling your story? This is another thing that takes a little bit of time. So I'm kind of contradicting myself here when I talk about when people say I don't have enough time, and I'm saying, well, you have to find time to do this. But just as you've thought about your values and you think about pivotal events, you can start shaping your story about who you are, because those values and pivotal events will give you some insights. And what I'm talking about when I talk about your story is it's a basic, it's what every leader needs to tell. It's my who am I story, why am I here, how do I add value, and where am I headed? And everybody wants to hear that. And it seems kind of one-sided. So what I do is talk about, uh, suggest to you talk about your who am I story, but how it has impact on your organization, right? And I do believe this one takes a lot longer than pivotal events and values. Those can be done rather quickly, kind of a fun exercise. You can even draw them, if you will. Your pivotal events have a whole kind of map on your wall of your life. But your story takes a little bit of time. But the power in your story is the fact that it is the essence of leadership, because it gets to self-awareness. So if I think of one example, what I want to tell you to do, because this one is a big one, and this one takes more time, is think about 3 words that you would use to describe yourself. Um, that word could be, I'm creative. Um, I believe in authenticity. I'm an expert problem solver. That's what I really like to do, is solve problems. Any adjectives that you would use to describe you? And just kind of randomly write those down. That same talk I told you about that I gave in Australia, I ran a similar exercise with that group, and I said, think of 3 words that describe you. And at the end of that talk, I asked, was that easy or difficult? And everybody said, really difficult. And I said, yeah, I know it's really hard to think about 3, I think it's really hard to think about 3 adjectives. And they said, no, we couldn't stop writing them down. We had tons of adjectives to describe ourselves. So I thought that was really interesting. I don't usually have that when I do these sessions. But if you think about the 3 adjectives, and if just take problem solving, there's another piece to this, because you don't want to show up to somebody and say, hey, I'm a creative expert problem solver, and you? Um, you want to put it into a storyline. So if we just take problem solving and say, because I'm good at problem solving, I can pull a team together, a diverse team together, or a diverse group of thinkers, and we can deliver a unique solution to, to whatever, to put in your company, if your company's Disney or your company's Goldman Sachs. Because I'm a unique problem solver, and I'm actually really like to work with people, I can bring a diverse group of community together, and we can provide a unique solution to the problem in, say, payroll or IT or something. People want to hear not only your story, because the story is really, it helps people lean in when you tell a story, but people want to know what you can do for them, right? If you're talking about your career. So there's a bit of give and take on this. It's not always, and you all know this, it's not always about you. So it's about how can you help? What value do you add to the company? And for me and for other people I've worked with, I think that's more palatable than using the kind of tired self-promotion. So I want to close. I want to kind of wrap up what I all that I've talked about. But I do want to add one more thing that I didn't include in my slide, because I thought it was really powerful from your when you did the poll. Mentors or sponsors or what I call trusted advisors are really important. Every single woman I talked to had one or the other, right? And one woman in particular that I interviewed in Singapore was running I didn't interview CEOs or managing directors. She was running a big function for a big IT company, and she was a mother of 5 and had a very large family, and she was also very athletic and very involved in her community, active in her community. And I said to her, how do you do what you do? and she used an absolutely beautiful term called "I have a web of inclusion." And I just found this term to be so powerful. It's quite different than saying I have a mentor, I have a sponsor, I have a coach, whatever. She built a web around her that included her family and that included her business colleagues and included her team, sports teams that she worked with, but that also included mentors and sponsors and people that she went to for advice. And it was multiple people. It wasn't just one mentor, right? every so what I'd like for you to think about when you leave this talk is think about 5 people that you would put into your web of inclusion that you would go to, even if you're perfectly content in your job and your career right now and you're blissfully happy. Think about, what you would do next, or if you're, some advice on how you can do what you do better. Or if you're stuck in your career right now, think about who you would go to talk to about it. So, here's what I've been thinking about. Help me, what do you think? These advisors, mentors, whatever you want to define it as, are critically important for your career. And I just found that term, web of inclusion, to be incredibly powerful. It was originally quoted by Sally Helgesen in a book called The Female Advantage, and I always feel it's important to give credit for people who own these words. So my advice to you as I wrap up is to say, reflect on your values, look back on your life, on where you've been, what was a pivotal event for you, and more importantly, what did you learn? Finally, share what you know, because your story really matters. And this is my career manifesto. I'm going to have it up here. You don't need to read all these words. You can go to my site and copy it. Please share this with others because I wrote it to be shared. And what I'd like to do is turn it over now for questions. And you can find the career manifesto that's my new site, Horan Global. So let me turn it over to you for questions.
Yeah. So, so everyone who's on the webinar, please feel free to send in questions. You can either do it in the question box or in the chat box. Grace and I will monitor that and for the questions to you, Jane. But as we're waiting, I had one question that really came up. And I just loved your story so much. Thank you again so much for sharing this. This is just so wonderful. So many things that I wrote down. And I don't know if anyone noticed, but I was actually tweeting some of the words that you said as I was listening. And so Jane, you'll see my tweets with you in it. But like we saw in the poll, there's so many people that don't have a mentor, and actually for myself too, that was my experience when I was in corporate. I just could not find someone, or didn't really know how to approach finding a mentor. And I think that definitely was something that held me back in my career. I just didn't know. I didn't trust my boss. I didn't feel comfortable. The people that I did like eventually left through merger and all that crazy stuff that happened. So I just wondered and you mentioned, think of 5 people. So after you think of these 5 people, what would you recommend to do? What would be the next step?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would, some people you probably already know on your list is I would make a point to go out and talk to them. And this is where I'm always really careful in giving advice, because I think a lot of times, particularly with our whole social media, there's lots of ways to connect and there's lots of ways to reach out. But I was just talking to a very senior head of diversity inclusion the other day, and he said to me, I'm so tired of people calling me and asking me for advice when they haven't talked to me in years. So I think it's really important is not only when you want to reach out to talk to somebody that you start building that conversation first and start building the relationship. So, but I would say just reach out. I've had old bosses that I've worked with that if I'm stuck on something, I through the years I've always kept in touch with them, but I'll ask a question, say I'm really stuck right now. I need to ask you for your advice.
Mm-hmm.
Invite somebody for a coffee if you can. Say I haven't been thinking about you. I haven't been in touch with you. I'd like to grab a coffee with you. And start off by asking them a little bit about them, because sometimes if you talk to people about what they're doing and what's going on in their life, you learn a lot more about about yourself too. So I'd say reach out and do it. There was a woman who I interviewed who hadn't talked to somebody very powerful inside her company for 10 years, and she reached out to me as a coach to ask me about career advice. And I said, you know what, you are connected to the most senior person in this organization. You should call him rather than me. I'm happy to help you. And she said, I haven't spoken to him in 10 years. And I said, pick up the phone and call and just find out how he's doing. And then after that, ask your question. So don't hold back. You know, even if it's a senior leader, they always love to tell their story, which is what I found. When you ask anybody about, tell me how you got to where you are today, they people love to share their stories.
Okay, wonderful. I just had a question that was kind of similar to that. I'll read it out. So, how would you approach someone to see if they'd be willing to be a mentor? Do you have key questions that we should ask mentors? Do you have any? I think you've already answered a lot of that, but do you have anything else that you'd like to add? Like other quick questions?
Yeah, yeah. There's I think that's a really good one. There's a lot of organizations that are putting in formal mentoring programs. There's some organizations that have an informal culture that informal mentoring works best. But I would say first build the relationship, right? And then second, I mean, maybe, and I'm not talking about, oh, it takes years. I'm just saying, you know, grab a coffee with the person, call the person and say, look, I, um, I enjoy talking to you. I think you know, you've provided some great insights. Would you mind being a mentor, an informal mentor to me? Then see where that goes, right? Yes or no. If yes, then I would have some back pocket questions to say, here's what I'm thinking about. I'm stuck in my career. You know, I'm in finance and I want to move to marketing. And how do I go about doing that? Or I've been working at this company for 10 years and I've been passed over for a promotion and I'm not certain why. You know me, can you tell me? So I would definitely have some questions because what I sense is and actually there's research on this, when mentoring is not effective is when you're not prepared. It's just like you kind of have these conversations but they go nowhere. It's just like anything, when you're preparing for a meeting, prepare for the mentoring conversation you want to have.
Great. So, would you say that it sounds like definitely the relationship building part is very important. You mentioned the informal mentorship. Um, would you recommend to formally ask, like, would you please be my mentor at some point? Or would you keep on having these conversations without using that word?
Yeah, I think that's a great question too. I think if you have a relationship and you call somebody for advice, I think you already have that informal relationship that you know you trust the person's opinion. Um, I think it could go either way. If you feel the need to say, look, I'd like to have an informal mentoring relationship with you and I'd like to call you every couple of weeks and here's what I'm working through, that's fine. But if you just want to continue it, just to have this give and take relationship where you seek advice, that is somebody you seek advice, does it have to be called out? I don't know. I mean, most women I've worked with for years, and sorry, let me backtrack. Most women when I interviewed and worked with, really successful women, said they started out having mentors, but then it just became somebody they would call periodically for advice, but it wasn't categorized as this mentoring relationship, you know?
Mm-hmm. Oh, wonderful. Great. Okay, so moving on to the next question. It says, what if I have changed industry and previous connections don't usually have the expertise to give advice for the different industry?
Yeah, so a lot of times, mentoring relationships, that's an interesting question. Mentoring relationships are, what I have found, it's mostly about navigating organizational dynamics, right? Or navigating the softer side rather than the technical side. So, but it's not to say you can't have a mentor or advisor or something on this new industry. So it leads me to think of a bigger answer. And this takes a little bit of time, right? You don't just have one person that you go to. Like I have one person that I can call up and say, look, I'm really stuck on with this one client, how could you help me? But that person might not be able to help me. I do a lot of work in office politics, right? That person might not be able to help me in office politics. So I might go and call somebody else. Like, here's what I'm stuck with. Here's what's happening with one of my clients. Can you help me? So, if you have really technical questions, like you've moved into a very different industry, typically there are professional groups. Typically there are, oh God, LinkedIn is incredibly powerful for finding people, right? So typically there's other experts that you can find in that field that you can reach out to. But I just want to make it clear, and I don't know if this is the underlying thing in this question, is don't forego your previous companies or your previous contacts. Those previous contacts are really important. So always stay connected with old bosses and colleagues and things like that, because they're going to provide you a different advice and different perspective and different advice on you. But moving from one industry to another industry, find some experts, find some technical experts in that industry.
Wonderful. We keep on getting more questions about mentors. I'm going to ask you.
Because that was the most one, right?
Yeah. So, how do you diversify your mentors?
Yeah. This is why I found that web of inclusion was so powerful, and I talk about it a lot because it really blew me away. And I'm actually I'm gonna put an Asian lens on this. What I found in interviewing women across Asia, and this links to mentorship, is that they didn't just look at like, oh, I work at company X and I have mentors there, and then I move to company Y and I have mentors there. A lot of them, almost every single one of them, had a family member that was a guide or a mentor, right? So it could have been father, could have been mother, could have been grandparents, could have been aunt or uncle. It was very much a connected web and very much related to family. So the question on how I would just sit down and take a minute. If all the questions are about mentoring, I would just look at it from a web of advisors. Kind of gets back to who you are and where you want to go. But so say you're in one company, you think I really want to move to this other company. Well, then who do you know that's there? How can you reach out to people around that area? How can you get advice? You have to know where you want to go, and then build this kind of these five key people and make them as diverse as possible, because you're going to get a lot more insights from the diversity rather than connecting with people like yourself. Um, yeah, people like yourself, or people in their same industry, or people in your same function.
Hmm.
Did that answer the question? I think
Yeah,
I got off on a
yeah,
tangent.
I think so. I mean, there's just so many facets to this to this.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm going to move on to questions, a different question here. So, how do you move into the first leadership role from individual contributor?
Mm, that's a good one. I don't, on that one, I would just, I think it depends on where you are, right, and what company, and then, okay, there's a couple steps you can take. You can, I kind of want to say this, and I don't want people to get, so you can get on, if you want to move into a management role, my sense is put your hand up for and talk to your boss and say, look, I want to move into a management role. Find out what you need to do to get there. Find out maybe why you haven't been selected for that. Maybe people don't know. And then if you have and you've been passed over, find out why you've been passed over, and then you probably need to do some development on that. The other thing is start leading a team or a project team or being part of a project team. Even if you are part of a project team and you're not the leader or the manager, step into that role. You have expertise, you have knowledge, you have something that's special about you that you can use and prove. And even so that would be one. Even if you did something on the outside, like maybe you're part of like this group, right? Maybe you said, I'm gonna lead something on the Asian American professional group, and then you talk and write about that, how you led that function, what you did, and what were the outcome. So it's all about either asking, if you're not given the opportunities, find out why. If you if you if it's, oh, you don't have enough experience, then find yourself on a project team and show that you can do it, or find it and join a professional team and show that you can do it. And I don't know the demographics, but one of the things I would highly recommend is joining a board. And I don't mean, oh, you're gonna show up to the Walt Disney Company tomorrow and say you want to be on the board, but join a nonprofit board. If you're passionate about education, get involved with an education group. If you're passionate about sports, get involved with a sports group. And in that community, you're leading, you're managing, you're finding out how to engage a team. There's a lot of power in being involved with nonprofit boards or just volunteering for those organizations.
Yes, I definitely agree to that. Especially thank you for pointing out, joining a nonprofit board. NAAAP is what we do is build and create leaders. So, for people out there who's listening today, this is a wonderful organization. If you're not part of it yet, please join and raise your hand and be part of the board. Show up, really do what you want to do. This is a great group to really practice being a leader and showing that your leadership ability, and also growing into a leader. So this is absolutely the perfect place to be. Thank you. I think this will be the last question, since we're right at time. So what was the pivotal event that made the architect by training NGO person take the initial step to get out of the architecture industry and become a chef? That's a significant change by itself.
Yeah, that is. What I have to tell you, there's a story behind this story, right? So I want to share this with you. First of all, she's the first. She's in my book, How Asian Women Lead. She's one of the first people that I interviewed for my research, and I actually was going down the path. Talk about a pivotal event. I was going down the path of only interviewing women who were in business, and I knew that she had this NGO. But I had a lot of people saying, you have to interview her, you have to interview her, and I did. But actually, I took her story out of my. This book is based on my doctoral dissertation, so I took her story out because it didn't align with my framework, and I kept going back to her story and back to her story, and honestly, every time I told her story, I would get tears in my eyes because she was an incredibly powerful person. And so I tell her story a lot, and it ended up being the first chapter of my book. So what led her to do this is the fact that she was a person who, oh boy, she was a person who I think was always on, her original quest was to help others and to eradicate poverty. That was really from the very beginning I think, of her being what she wanted to do. And she was quite fascinated by architecture, and I think also what it was, I think there was a big push, as in many, and I don't know if you have this being Asian Americans, but in a lot of the women that I work with in Asia, their families kind of tell them what to do, moms or dads, or tell them, of course, that book, The Tiger Mom, that was out last year. So she was kind of directed as to where she should go, although her family didn't necessarily want her to be an architect. That kind of worked because it provided something. So then she became an architect, and then what she did, she started traveling around the world. She went to South America, Latin America, and then she worked on an organic food farm. She decided to give up architecture and worked on an organic food farm in the north of Japan, and that's what led her into opening up restaurants. And then after that, she had this critical event that changed her direction. And while that seems like a really weird, erratic path, I can actually string together how this whole thing happened. And this is one of the reasons why I feel so strongly that all of you should just take the day, not even the day, the next half hour, and look back on your life and see these different little things that have happened to you and the decisions that you made, and how you changed course. Because literally it was she went to London, went to South America, and thought, I don't want to be an architect, and moved back to Japan and started working on an organic food farm. Incredibly powerful woman, and yeah, just amazing,
Wonderful.
just
So
amazing.
this story is it the How Asian Women Lead book?
So yeah, it's the first story in how Asian women lead, and there's lots of interesting detail about that. I just want to, before you close, Nozomi, look, if any of you have any questions, you can see this my site. You can either go to that site, or if you have some private questions that you felt like, oh, I feel uncomfortable asking, send me an email. I always answer. I write a newsletter on different things on careers, and I'm more than happy if you think I just wanted to ask one more question and you didn't get it resolved on this webinar. So feel free to send me an email.
Wonderful. And the URL is up there on the screen. It's www.horan, so HORANGLOBAL.com. And I can tell you, I've had the opportunity to follow you for a little while since we've been talking, and I absolutely love your newsletters. So I would highly encourage everyone on this call to go to the website and sign up. And like Jane shared, you can download the manifesto from her website. So Jane, thank you so very much. This was just such a wonderful talk. We were just such a so inspiring. So many great tips and things that we can do immediately after this call. So thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, and enjoy your evenings.
Yes, thank you. Just one last thing. This is the screen that I missed to show at the very beginning to everyone. I just want to put this up again. So we have a webinar coming up on May 18th. Pimp your LinkedIn profile. So go to naap.org to see the details, and so you can register. And in August, we have the national convention coming up. So again, please go to www.naap.org and find out the details. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for being with us for an hour, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Grace.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.